Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Innovation Podcast, your source for all things innovation. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Kevin Dixon on the line. He's founder over at Boxxstep. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Looking forward to it, mate.
Oh, man, so excited to get into this topic today. So a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives listening, and we're going to talk about how B2B decision-making has changed, which I agree with. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about your background and about Boxxstep. So tell us a little bit more about the company, please.
The company, it's a platform that helps sales teams align their selling with the buying. And if you start to think about it, that sounds a bit strange. It's because nearly every single organization has a sales tool called CRM. It's actually now the biggest software sector by revenue worldwide. I think it's about 90% of all companies over 10 employees have got one. But the reality is it doesn't really help them to sell. It tends to be the records about their companies. And I spent 20 years as a sales leader working with sales teams, and we all use CRM. But gradually, everything's changed. And so I sort of went about and said, okay, everything's changed, but CRM and other sales tools out there aren't helping sales teams to actually embrace the new way that B2B organizations are buying. And so I founded the company.
That's awesome. So, Kevin, let's actually just jump right in, and that's why I wanted you on the show to talk about this topic. So, I mean, we know people have their normal CRM. I completely agree with that. So, but what's next? So, how B2B decision-making has changed. Where do you want to start this topic? It's a big topic.
Yeah, it is. But it's a seriously important one as well, because if you start to look at the sales industry, first of all, about half of all salespeople won't make quota this year. So half of all sales guys are going to be under target. Secondly, about half of every forecasted deal that people have in their pipelines end in a no decision outcome. So the prospect does nothing. So there's a lot of things going wrong in sales. So really the problem that has occurred because we haven't, as sellers, adapted to the way people want to buy. Now, let me put a little bit of history here in terms of history. I'm not a young seller. And I remember the days where you could literally go to pitch, propose, and close, and there'd be one person. And this person would sign off significant deals. They would make a decision on behalf of the rest of the organization, then they would tell the organization they'd done it. Clearly, these were senior people. Now, over time, you now start to see what they call consensus-based decision-making. And what does that mean? Well, the reality is an individual person does not want to be accountable for making a decision on their own. If you think about it, amount of decisions, if they make a decision and then it comes back and bites them on the arse because not everybody embraced it, not everybody agreed with it, they didn't feel they were part of the decision-making. Mm-hmm. So now, senior decision makers, they don't want to make a decision until everyone's on board. So what I think we've seen the swing from is selling is no longer about getting an individual yes from one person decision maker. It's about getting a collective yes from across what's called the buyer committee. And the buyer committee is a group of people within that organization from all different levels. That could be stakeholders, it could be users, but a trusted group of people who come together to make a decision about a complex or enterprise deal that you're trying to sell to.
That's awesome. So where do you think, where do you think a lot of people, like organizations, are failing when it comes to this change in the way that buyers are making decisions? Because there's obviously, put it this way, obviously nobody's listening is doing this on purpose. Like half of salespeople out there, as you mentioned, they're not missing quota on purpose. So like, what's the fix? Like, what should people be thinking about?
Honestly, that is a great question because here's the thing, what we find all the time. So I always make a lot of reference to the lovely people at Gartner because Gartner provides us some really extensive research that tells us a lot of information that drives the way we think and that drives the way we have to change in the sales industry. Day in, day out, I talk to sales leaders and I say, okay, typically, how many people do your sales teams engage with when they're trying to sell their solution? And the answers come from somewhere between 4, 5, or 6. Yet Gartner did this extensive research, and they asked all these organizations, and they say, how many people from your organization were involved in making this decision? Do you want to hazard a guess at what the typical number is in a B2B buying decision today?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm going to say 3. That's a wag. 3.
Okay, not even close. It's actually around 10 to 11.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Obviously, I'm a younger seller, and I haven't been working on sales for a while. I've been doing this podcast. Sorry, go ahead. My team, for shame to my team, they're like, this guy doesn't know. Go ahead.
And guess what? They say also as well. And if what you sell is technical, it's even more. It's somewhere between 12 and 14 people. So think about the delta now. The sales leaders, the sales team say, yeah, it's about 4, 5, 6. The buyers say, well, actually, it's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's a bunch of people that are being missed. Now, I always say that selling now is like building a jigsaw puzzle. If you don't have all the pieces in place, you can't complete it. Because there's a lot of people, if you imagine, one of the things I say about salespeople is they engage with an organization. They find 1 or 2 people, they seem to be getting some traction. These people like them, they're giving them real positive feedback. And then these sales guys relax. They say, well, hey, they're like a sucker fish on a whale. They're thinking, right, we're going to enjoy the ride now. We've got this guy or this girl who's going to really likes us, and they're really well positioned in the organization to drive it forward for us. Guess what? They lose the deal. Because sometimes there are multiple people like this. There are multiple stakeholders who are working on the same project that may have difference of opinions, different strategies. Because that's the thing about selling. I always say that if you try and sell something, selling is about influencing a decision to change. So getting people to buy something that's different than what they've got today or replace what they've got today. So the number one thing you have to understand is how do people make decisions. Who is involved in this buyer committee? What are the roles, reporting lines? What's the dynamics in there? Because that's the problem. The more people involved, the higher the risk of a no decision outcome. So if you're selling something complex and there's 12 to 14 people involved, trying to get a collective yes across all those people becomes incredibly challenging. And if you're only engaging or identifying and engaging with 4, 5, or 6 of them, you're missing out at least half of them that could veto the deal, or that they could be the showstopper for you. So it's what everyone talks about sales. You've got to do discovery questions. Yes, I agree with discovery questions, but you've also got to do buyer discovery. Who are the buyers involved? Who are the stakeholders, the tire kickers, the users, whoever might be involved in that ultimate decision making? Because they have an opinion, they have a recommendation. They all contribute ultimately to the final decision. So you have to identify and engage with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Kevin, that being said, I could talk to you about sales and sales engagement and, buyer decision. And I know we just barely scratched the surface on this one, but we're about out of time for this episode. If somebody's listening to this and they want to continue this conversation with either yourself or someone over at your team, and they want to learn more about Boxxstep, what's the best way for them to connect and to follow up with the brand?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Kevin Dixon, Dixon. I think there's a bunch of us, but look out for the bald fellow with the glasses and a black shirt. But if you just search on Kevin Dixon Boxxstep, you find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. Or the website is boxxstep.com, and that's BOXXSTEP.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, really appreciate you coming on the show today and really getting into the nuances of how decision-making has changed when in B2B. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes Store. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Innovation, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments on the video. Love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Kevin, thanks again for coming on the show.
My pleasure.